Well, hello, I'm Alex, and today I've got an idea for making zines. So you can use this simple zine format to develop a daily practice. It's small, it's little, you can take it with you anywhere you go. It's perfect for prompts, and it's perfect for when you don't have time. You know how I'm always saying, it's easy to spend a few minutes a day in creative play. I'm sure some of you are like, well, it's easy for you to say you're an artist. So, I'm making these videos for you to take play breaks with me. This is your creativity timeout, baby. Just grab whatever supplies you have on hand, work alongside me, don't worry. I'm keeping this no fuss fabulous, easy peasy. Go ahead, check it out. Hello. Today I'm going to give you an overview of easy ways to play with coloring. I've got examples to show you that include color pencils, watercolor pencils, markers, watercolor markers, liquid watercolors, and gouache paint sticks. I'm so excited. I've gone ahead and prepared these for you, but not just that. All the pages I'm showing you here that give examples of different ways to color, I've actually made a PDF where you can download these 8 coloring pages for yourself, print them out, and play around with coloring. So the only note I would add to that is, depending on what kind of paper you print them on, is going to limit you a little bit in terms of how you can color. Regular thin office paper is fine, and the best tools will be color pencils, markers, highlighters, that kind of thing. If your paper is thicker, like the examples I have here, with this is craft paper thickness, cardstock thickness, then really anything goes. You can use watercolor. You can use watercolor pencils and then add water with a Q-tip. You can use liquid watercolors inside brush pens. You can use watercolor markers and add water. So I'll show you those examples and explain that, just letting you know that the type of paper you print on may limit you in terms of not being able to do everything I'm showing you here. But that PDF is waiting for you, so see the description below this video for the link. All right, let's go. On this first page, I just did a very basic color pencil example here. So these are just very inexpensive color pencils. The only thing I would say is that some color pencils are really waxy, and I prefer the ones that go on smoother. And if there's any way you can test them out. If not, just get whatever you can. It's not a big deal. It really only affects you if you're layering your colors, which is probably not an issue. But if you like layering, because color pencils can be applied very softly, I want to say, you can apply them with a very soft touch, and then you can layer. So you could layer, let me think here, you could layer yellow over red, and then you would end up with an orangey red, right? Waxy, if the color pencils are hard and waxy, the layering is a little bit harder. Okay, that's the only, it's probably not even an issue for you, I'm guessing. So, color pencils, lots of fun. They're so easy to use. They just glide on the paper, and you can make the same color can show up super dark if you press harder, or super light if you press lightly. endless possibilities. All right, that's example number 1. Example number 2 is color pencils, but they're actually watercolor pencils. So you can see these are fatter, but that's just the type, that's just the brand that makes these, makes them fatter. They look fatter. The biggest way you'll know the difference is the price. These are more expensive. And they do sell really basic ones, and then they sell really fancy ones. And these are sort of in between. And what's fun about these is they have a ton of pigment. And you can activate them with water. So the example for that is this guy. And I just used a little glass with water in it and some Q-tips. And basically you draw with the color pencil, and then you can wet your Q-tip and go back in. Now if you have one of these brush pens filled with water, it's the same thing. So it might be worth your while if you're planning on doing coloring to just buy one of these. Buy the cheapest one you can find. I've bought really expensive ones and really cheap ones. And if it's just going to be for water, go with the cheap one, honestly. Get a medium tip, not a super fat one and not a super thin one. Get a medium tip, okay? Because if it's really cheap, then what's cheap about it are these filaments that make the brush part, and they will sort of splay. And so even though it looks fairly thin, it's going to get fatter over time. And then you just open them up and you add water, okay? So use a brush pen or use a Q-tip dipped in water and spread that color around, and you'll get these watercolor effects even though you just used color pencils. So this is really fun if you're like taking your sketchbook with you and doodling in the park, and you're using a permanent pen to doodle, and then you've got a little pouch with some colored pencils in them and one of these with water, and then you can actually be watercoloring. You know, who would have thought? You need very few supplies compared to the traditional watercoloring, where you've got to set yourself up and add the water to the watercolors and paint that way. And they do make mini kits of those as well to take with you. But anyway, watercolor pencil example. Next example is just to mix your color pencils and your markers. So whatever color pencils you might have with some markers. And the markers I used here are these guys, which have 2 kinds of tips, the chisel tip and the regular tip. And it looks fat, but it's actually pretty thin because it's really hard. Maybe with use it would get softer and be like a fat marker, but right now that tip is pretty thin because it's so stiff. Okay, so these are sort of see-through markers, so they kind of look like watercolors because they're a bit transparent. And all I did was play around with adding either. So I'm adding colored pencils, maybe I go over it with the marker, then I go over it with the pencil again, or I just add the marker on top to change the color a little bit. These could also be watercolor pencils if that's what you have. So I would just use whatever color pencils you have and some markers. And you can get the same effect with highlighters, because highlighters are also a little bit transparent, right? It's the whole point behind a highlighter. Okay, next example. This is just markers. So this is a mix of markers, like the ones I just showed you, and then some highlighters added in. So that's very basic. And this is liquid watercolor. So what is liquid watercolor? So watercolors, instead of coming solid, like in a square or a circle, instead of buying it like this chunk of watercolor, basically a chunk of pigment that gets activated with water, you can buy it liquid. So this is very watery looking, but the pigment is extremely concentrated in here. It's amazing how beautiful these colors are. So you can see in Spanish it says acuarela líquida, and this is liquid watercolor. And what I do with those, remember the brush pens I just mentioned? Well, I have a whole set of brush pens that are ready to go at all times. So, do you see a whole set of these? So these are my favorite colors. I always have these ready to go. So how does that work? Well, remember how I said you could just add water here and use this as your means to add water to activate your color pencils? Well, you open this up and you drip a little bit of this watercolor liquid in here. Liquid watercolor, sorry. And then you add water. That's it. Depending on how strong you want it is going to influence how much of this you add. That's it. So it just takes a little experimentation. You add a few drops, you add water, you test it out. If it's not strong enough, you add a few more drops. That's basically how I go about it. This stuff might be pricey, but it lasts forever. I think I've had these for 2 years. So I guess it depends on how much you do. If it's worth your while to invest in that. So that's that. So you can see just watercolor here. Of course, you need thick paper for that, or a sketchbook with thick paper if you've got doodles in it. This is the same thing, and I just used 2 colors. So I used the blue and the pink. Just these 2 colors, and because it's watercolor and you can put one color down and do the other color around, it keeps bleeding and bleeding and bleeding, and you get some really fun effects that way. So it's amazing with just 2 colors what you can do. Of course, it always depends on what your design is, right? What is the design on the coloring page? What are you going for? Like, this might be a hard design to do that with, depending on what you're trying to do, right? Okay. So this guy is using 2 watercolor brush pens. So I've got the liquid watercolor in here ready to go in my brush pens. And now I'm introducing these markers. So these are watercolor markers. So just like there's watercolor pencils, you can look for watercolor markers. Now these are actually for kids, so this is really affordable. But these can get very fancy as well. So just like the watercolor pencils can go from cheap to super expensive, watercolor markers, especially if you're talking about markers at the level of what illustrators might use for manga, comic type illustrations, pricey. This is very basic, made for kids. You can see that the tip looks like a brush pen. It's a little bit stiff, but it does work like a brush tip, like a stiff brush tip. And here in Spain, the brand they're called Aquarelle, which is just a play on the word acuarela, which means watercolor. So what did I do? Well, I added the watercolor markers where I wanted them, and instead of using a Q-tip with water or a brush pen with water, what I did was, instead of it just being water and going into it like this, I actually went in with color. So that's why I have these 2 colors here. So these are my watercolor markers, and then what it looks like if I go in with pink watercolor, yellow watercolor on each one. And I thought it was really fun. I thought that turned out that surprisingly fun. I thought it might get muddy, but it didn't. So that is another easy example. And then the last example I have here, let me put this guy away. So the last example I have here are these gouache sticks. Now I call these gouache sticks, I call them tempera sticks. I hope that isn't confusing if I've mentioned that in prior videos. I'll try to sort of clear it up today. So this is one brand, and the words that they put on here are, in Spanish they say tempera sólida, which is like saying solid tempera. Then it's also called paint stick. I've also seen it called poster paint. I think it's on this one where it says
solid poster paint. So this is a different brand. Solid poster paint. Tempera stick. Right? And then in French it says gouache solide, which is like saying solid gouache. I've heard of these referred to as gouache sticks, gouache paint sticks. So there you go. It seems to be the same thing. Now if you were to buy liquid tempera, that's a very basic type of paint, sometimes used, well, it's sold, usually packaged for kids to paint with. Sometimes it's referred to as finger paint. It's not actually the same thing as finger paint. Finger paint is stickier, but it looks like it because when they sell it, they package it in primary colors, you know. So you'll always see red, yellow, blue, and maybe green and orange. But anyway, what can you do with these? Well, these aren't very precise, okay? They go on like a stick. I mean, they are a stick. And sometimes when you start, look, this one now doesn't even want to go down. So now I'm stuck with that. Yeah. So the only problem with sticks sometimes if you turn them too much, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to use it anyway. So sometimes when they go on, they leave like bits, sort of like remind you of a crayon. Okay. So what I do sometimes is I use a scrap piece of paper and I just get that first rub down off. And then they work better. And the same thing with a glue stick. If you've ever used a glue stick and you notice that the first time you want to use it to glue, it doesn't want to rub. Like maybe there's a super thin microscopic layer that's dried on there or something. So just get that off. Try not to waste any of it, but just get that off and then start using them. And you'll see how much fun they are. When they dry just like paint. So then you can use color pencils or markers on top of them, and I've actually chosen to use these watercolor markers again. So how can you use these? Well, you can put them down if you have a design that allows for bigger areas where you're not doing intricate, you know, obviously it's not going to work for anything where the lines are very close together. So this is a good example for that. You can, as soon as you put them down, if you take a Q-tip with water, you can move it around, sort of spread it around a little bit while it's still wet. As soon as it dries, it's dry and it's not going to get activated with water again. Which I have to point out, anything that's done with watercolor, it's never dry permanently, ever. If you were to drip water on there, it's going to activate it again. So, not that anybody's planning on dripping water on their watercolors, but just so you know, this stuff, once it's dry, I've tried it out in my sketchbook, once it's dry, you can take a Q-tip with water or a brush pen with water and it's not moving, which is kind of nice, if you ask me, depending on what you're using it for. Okay, so I didn't use water. No water for this one. I just put the gouache stick down. I'm not worried about it being, like, the whole point is for it to be a little bit more messy, and then I went in with these watercolor markers and did some designs, and I chose one color to go with each one. So wherever I put down the red, I'm going to add blue lines. The pink, I'm going to add red lines. You see that? I just sort of came up with this little guide here to have fun with that. All right. I hope this has been fun. And I hope you download these coloring pages. There's 8 of them. And I hope you also, if you've been playing with your sketchbook and doing any of my videos for sketchbook doodling, if your sketchbook has thick paper, you can play with some of these watercolor techniques. If not, just have fun with markers and highlighters and color pencils. So color in what you've doodled. Use a coloring book, use these coloring pages. Here's something that I doodled that I did a video about where I was doodling knickknacks in a drawer. And because this paper's fairly thick, it's not as thick as this cardstock, but it's thick enough and you can go in with watercolors. It's just a lot of fun. So I was using the brush pens for this guy.
Okay, I hope you had fun taking this tiny play break with me. Be honest, it was super easy. You know, when it comes to your creativity, it's never about what you're making. It's about how you feel while you're making it, right? Okay, I've got lots more videos on my YouTube channel here, so subscribe, stay tuned, play. Come back and get your daily dose of make stuff feel good energy. Thank you so much for being here.